Good morning. Today we look at Numbers 17, 18, and 19. And remember yesterday we had a little bit of discussion about, who should be making decisions and who is God talking to, and some jealousies there about, people wanting to have more, and some difficulties that arrive because of that. And chapter 17 begins with God saying to Moses, have each of the 12 tribes get a staff, a big stick, and bring them all to the tabernacle. Write each man's name on that staff so you know for sure which one is which. And on Aaron's staff, write, of course, Aaron's name. And they put those 12 staffs in the tabernacle overnight. And the next morning, as Moses went into the tent, says the staff of Aaron had put forth buds, produced blossoms, and ripe almonds. Think about that. Overnight, this staff, this dry, hard, dead stick, had not only gotten roots, but it had grown branches, leaves, blossoms, and ripe almonds. And I think about the improbability of that. But then I'm reminded that, in the desert, it's dry. We know that. The desert, the sands of the desert, and places in the desert when they get a rain, the morning after a rain, the seeds that are in the soil have sprouted and grown and blossomed with a flower and set seeds already, in 1 day's time or less than 1 day's time, so that there will be seeds there next time it rains. And so this is just one of the ways, when I look at this staff of Aaron's, doing that overnight, it just reminds me of so much of what God has done to provide, for different places of the earth. And I think of where there's been a volcanic eruption and the lava comes down, it's not long that there are sprouts and trees and things that grow even there where it's desolate. But anyway, so God has very definitely chosen Aaron as the chief priest, as the head of the priests. And in the rest of this chapter, in chapter 18, it talks about, the tribe of Levi. The Levites will be the priests, but Aaron is the high priest. And it is only Aaron and Aaron's sons, the high priests, who will go behind the curtain into the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. And in chapter 18 also, it talks a lot more about the offerings that are given to God, the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, the animals, and all of those things that are given to God. And, it's spelled out that, God gets a portion of that, and then the rest of it remains as food and nourishment, bread and meat for the priests and all of that. But, it's the Lord spoke to Aaron, I have given you charge of the offerings made to me. So Aaron is the chief priest, and, and in Jesus' day, there was a high priest. And think about, even before Jesus was born, Zechariah, John the Baptist's father, was the high priest. And he had gone behind the curtain into the Holy of Holies to offer the sacrifice when God, the angel of God, spoke to him about him, Zacharias and Elizabeth, having a child and naming him John. And, so this high priest, this priestly order has been, carried out through all of history from the time of Moses and Aaron until, today yet, they still have the high priest. And so it spells out, the priest's portion of the offerings and how they designate it, how they, some of it, again, how the offerings are done. And, verse 14 of chapter 18 says, speaking to, I'll start at 13, speaking to the priest, the first fruits of all that is in the land, when they bring it to the Lord, shall be yours. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat of it. Every devoted thing in Israel shall be yours. So the donations, the offerings that are brought for, for sin offerings, for gracious, whatever they're brought for, belong to the priests, the priestly tribe, but more importantly to God. But there is a portion of it, the first fruit of the womb of all creatures shall be yours, there's a redemption price for all of this as well that is established in here. and trying to read through it and, get it all straight in my head again, it's mind boggling to me of everything that's going on in here. But God has it all spelled out, and Moses and Aaron, and they get it all figured out, and they remember it all, and they try to follow it. But of course, we know sin enters in and all of that and stuff. But in verse 21 of chapter 18 says, "To the Levites I have given every tithe in Israel for a possession in return for their service that they perform." So again, the Levitical tribe, the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, sons of Israel that way, who's Israel and Jacob, still got to remember that they're the same person. But they have different responsibilities. They don't tend the land. They don't do a lot of the other things, but yet God makes sure that they are taken care of. Verse 26, God says, "You shall speak to the Levites, saying, when you receive from the Israelites the tithe that I have given from them for your portion, you shall set apart an offering from it to the Lord." So a tithe of a tithe. And I remember a conversation one time with a person that was a different denomination, and he would donate to the church, and he was talking to me about how their church worked, and he says, so we the parishioners donate to the church, and then the pastor makes his tithe to the bigger church. The church itself didn't support the bigger church, but the pastor, and it's just a reminder of how we do different things, but yet a reminder of how we support God's ministry. And this is, spelled out right back here. This is God saying to the Levites, you're going to be my priests, and I'm going to make sure I take care of you. And it goes on. Chapter 19 deals with how you purify a defiled person. And it talks about, especially about people who have been in a tent, in a house with someone who has died, or if they have come upon someone who has died, or dealt with someone who has died, and the statute of the law, and it's to bring a red heifer, and so it's specific. God's saying there's different things for different things, and for this we need a red heifer, and so they had all of these differentiations, and it was like the spotless and pure lambs, and all of that. But he says in verse 4, the priest Eleazar shall take some of its blood. So this isn't Aaron. This is this priest Eleazar has a different responsibility for this, and he'll take cedar wood and hyssop and crimson material, and all of the proper methods, God is saying, for purifying someone who has come into contact with a deceased person. And starting in verse 14, it said, this is the law when someone dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent will be unclean for 7 days. And then whoever is in the open field and touches one who has been killed by a sword, or, so it doesn't matter where you are. If you have touched or encountered the body of a person who has died, there is the cleansing rituals here that, you will be made clean again. And, it's very specific in different ways again and stuff. And it's, verse 21, again, it will be a perpetual statute. This isn't something you just do today and forget about, but this is something that you carry on through with you for the rest of time. And we know that God, for God, time has not the same meaning as it does for us, and that's great. And it's just, and so in this lesson, with Aaron's staff, this dead wood stick, being able to do all that it did in one night is just another example for us of how time for God is such a different idea than what it is for us.